I was 22 when I ended things with Sam. We had been together for over a year and a half, and on paper, it looked like the kind of relationship everyone wanted. Constant attention, sweet texts, surprise date nights. But over time, that attention became surveillance. Those texts turned demanding. The surprises began feeling like traps, and by the end, it wasn't love anymore. It was fear in disguise. When we met, he swept me off my feet. He remembered the tiniest things I said. How I liked my coffee, the way I tucked my hair behind my ear when I was nervous. He brought me flowers every Sunday and left little notes in my jacket pockets. It was romantic, but even in the beginning, something felt too much. He once bought me a dress in my exact size even though I'd never told him. He said he guessed. Looking back, I realize he probably went through my closet. I should have known. But I was young. I told myself I was lucky, that he just loved me hard. But as the months went on, his affection became possessiveness. If I took too long to reply, he'd send 10 texts in a row. If I posted on social media without telling him where I was, he'd accuse me of hiding things. He'd screenshot photos of male friends who liked my posts and demand to know who they were. Every day began to feel like a cross-examination. The final straw came on a rainy Tuesday night. I was asleep when I felt him get out of bed. I pretended to be asleep, thinking maybe he was just going to the bathroom. But I heard him unzip my purse. Then the quiet tapping of phone buttons. He was going through my messages. I sat up and said his name. He froze. I saw fear on his face, but it wasn't guilt. It was the fear of being caught, of losing control. I broke up with him the next morning. He didn't fight, didn't cry, just stared at me and said, "Are you sure?" I nodded. He left without another word. I remember standing by the door long after it shut, waiting to hear him come back. He never did, at least not that day. The next week was calm, too calm. I blocked his number, removed him from socials, even told mutual friends not to give out my new address when I moved a month later. I wanted a fresh start. For a while it worked. But one night I was locking up after a late shift at the cafe where I worked, and I saw a car idling across the street, headlights off, just sitting there. When I walked toward it, it pulled away slowly. I didn't see the driver, but I didn't have to. I knew it was him. Then the calls started. Blocked number. No voice, just breathing. Always around midnight. Every time I answered, I told myself it might be someone else. A prank maybe. But deep down, I knew. It was Sam. I started leaving lights on. Moved my bed away from the window. Slept with a hammer under my pillow. I went to the police. They took a report but said without evidence or a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested a restraining order, but without proof of who was calling or showing up, it was just a piece of paper. I started logging everything, call times, texts, photos of the same car driving past my apartment. Then came the note, taped to my front door in the middle of the night. "You really thought I couldn't find you?" In his handwriting. No envelope, no stamp, which meant he'd been at my door. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I took sick leave from work. I considered moving again. That weekend, I installed a security camera above my door. The next night, at 2:17 a.m., the camera caught someone standing just out of frame. A shadow, not enough for facial ID. But the next morning, I found a gift box on my doorstep. Inside was a Polaroid of me, taken inside the cafe. I was laughing with a customer, my back to the entrance. The photo was printed on glossy paper. On the back, he'd written, "You smile for everyone but me." I changed my locks, slept at a friend's place. But even there, I started getting texts again, this time from a different number. "I miss you. You don't have to be afraid of me. You were perfect, but you made me ugly." My friends told me to change my number again, but I didn't see the point. He always found it. I thought about buying a weapon. Instead, I bought blackout curtains and kept a chair jammed under the door every night. Then one night, I came home and saw muddy footprints on the kitchen floor. Just one set. They didn't match my shoes. I checked the windows. One was cracked open. I hadn't used it in weeks. I checked the closet. On the floor was an old hoodie, one I'd thrown out months ago, folded neatly. I called the police again. This time, they brought in a canine unit. The dog picked up a scent but lost it outside the building. They told me to stay with someone else for a while, so I did. But when I came back 2 weeks later, there was a message carved into my bathroom mirror. Not written, carved. It said, "Don't disappear on me again." That was the night I knew I had to leave. Not the apartment, the state. I quit my job, packed everything I owned, and moved across the country. I changed my name on social media, deleted old photos, even paid to have my info scrubbed from people search sites. For the first time in months, I could breathe. It lasted nearly a year. Then last week I found something in my mailbox. No name, no address, just a key, my old apartment key, the one I lost a year ago. Attached was a tag that read, "You always forget things. He's still out there, watching, waiting. And if I ever disappear, I need someone to know." It was him.
She was still in love. Back in college, I dated a girl named Maya. We met during our second semester, in a creative writing class. She had this captivating energy, dark curly hair, eyes that lingered just a second too long, and a laugh that sounded like she didn't care who heard. I was drawn to her in the way people are drawn to trouble dressed up as confidence. At first, she was the best thing that had happened to me. Attentive, passionate, obsessive in the way that feels flattering when you're young and dumb. The honeymoon phase didn't last long. Within a few months, the red flags started popping up. She didn't like me going to parties without her. She didn't like when I hung out with female classmates, even for group projects. If I didn't answer a text within 10 minutes, she'd send 3 more, then call. And if I didn't answer, she'd show up wherever I was. I excused it as intensity. I thought maybe she'd just been hurt before. I didn't realize how far she would go. When I finally broke things off, it was winter break. We were both staying on campus because our homes were out of state. I figured the holidays would offer a clean break. I met her at a cafe and told her it was over. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just looked at me and said, "You'll come back. You're still mine." I brushed it off as bitterness, but deep down, I felt something cold take root in my chest. The next few days were quiet. I blocked her number, removed her from my socials. I thought it was done. But then the messages started coming again from random numbers this time. "Thinking about you. Still waiting. You miss me too." I ignored them, convinced she'd eventually get tired. But the messages didn't stop. They escalated. I started seeing her on campus again. Not in the dining hall or the library, but lurking. Standing outside buildings I was leaving. Sitting in parked cars that vanished when I looked twice. Once, during a late-night study session in a common room, I looked out the window and saw her across the courtyard. Just staring up at me, not moving, not blinking. I turned around to tell my study partner, and when I looked back, she was gone. Then came the photo. It was in my campus mailbox. No name, no note. Just a single printed photo of me. Asleep. In my bed. My window was behind my head in the image, open just a crack. I don't remember leaving it unlocked. I went cold. I started pushing furniture against the door at night. I set up an app on my old phone to record sounds while I slept. One night, it caught heavy breathing for over 6 minutes. The phone was on my nightstand. I contacted campus security. They gave her a warning. She played dumb. Said I was just bitter. Trying to make her look crazy. But even they seemed uneasy. One officer told me in private, "You might want to stay somewhere else for a while." So I did. I crashed on a friend's couch off campus for a week. When I returned, I found a gift box on my bed. Inside was the hoodie I thought I'd lost during our first date. It smelled like her perfume. No one had access to my room but me and her, apparently. One night, I came back late from a shift at the library and found her sitting on the steps of my dorm. Calm, casual. She said she just wanted to talk. I told her to leave, that I'd call the police. She smiled and said, "You'd never do that. You're too soft." And she was right. I just walked past her, locked my door, sat on the floor with my back against it until morning. I filed a formal no-contact order through the school. She was told to stay away from me. For a few weeks, it worked. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of my door creaking. It was 3:12 a.m. My roommate was out of town. I sat up, and she was in the room. In the shadows, standing over me, whispering my name. My chest locked up. I couldn't move at first. When I finally found my voice and screamed, she bolted. I don't know how she got in. I transferred schools a month later. I didn't tell anyone where I went, started over. But last Christmas, I got a card in the mail. No return address, no signature. Just 3 words. still in love. I hadn't posted anything online, hadn't spoken to anyone from my old campus, but she still found me. I never told my wife. She doesn't know that I sleep with my phone recording every night. That I check the locks 3 times before bed. That I never park in the same spot twice. But some mornings, I find things moved, a cup I didn't touch, a curtain slightly open. And sometimes, when it's really quiet, I swear I hear my name whispered from outside the bedroom window.
Story 3. The door wasn't locked. Jordan wasn't the worst guy I'd ever dated, but he was the scariest. Not in the beginning though. When we first met, he was charming, intense in a way that made you feel like the center of the universe. He opened doors, brought me coffee, remembered every tiny detail. It felt like safety, but intensity like his always comes with a price. And it didn't take long for his intensity to become obsession. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was coming out of a breakup and he made me feel wanted again. Special. Seen. We talked until 4 a.m. that night. He texted me as I was walking to my car. Wish you didn't have to leave. I smiled. At first it felt nice, but looking back it was the first sign he didn't know how to let go. 3 months in, he had keys to my apartment. I didn't remember giving them to him. I think he took them off my keychain when I was asleep. He started showing up unannounced, sometimes with food, sometimes just to make sure I was okay. I ignored the unease. I wanted it to work. I was tired of failed relationships, but the red flags became impossible to ignore. If I took too long to answer a text, he'd call. If I didn't pick up, he'd come over. Once I was sick in bed and didn't feel like talking. He banged on my door for 20 minutes straight until I let him in. Then he cried and said he thought I was dead. I started feeling more like a hostage than a girlfriend. When I told him I needed space, he said, "If you leave, I'll lose everything. I'll hurt myself." That was his go-to line. Guilt was his currency. The final break happened after a horrible fight. I told him it was over. He begged, screamed, cried on the floor, said no one would love him like I did. I walked away trembling. I blocked his number, changed my locks, and warned my building manager not to let him in. I thought it was over. A week passed. Then one night, I came home from work and saw my bedroom light on. I live alone. I always turn off the lights. I unlocked the door slowly and walked in with my heart pounding. Everything looked untouched. But when I went to my bedroom, the window was slightly open. I never open it. I checked the closet. Nothing. But my pillow had a distinct dent, like someone had been lying on it. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I forgot. Maybe it was nothing. But the next night I heard footsteps. Above me. I lived on the top floor. There were no neighbors above me, just the attic. I stood still, straining to hear. Then I heard a soft creak, like someone shifting their weight. I grabbed a broomstick and pulled the attic ladder down. Nothing. But in the dust on the floorboards I saw prints. Bare feet. I didn't sleep that night. I shoved my dresser in front of the door and sat up all night with my phone in one hand and a knife in the other. I called the police in the morning. They checked the attic. No one. They said maybe a squatter, but I knew better. They asked if I had an ex who might be stalking me. I told them everything. They made a report, but without evidence or a direct threat, there was little they could do. A few nights later, I woke to music playing. It was my speaker, connected to my phone, which was turned off. The song, a playlist Jordan made me in our first month together. It wasn't saved on my account anymore. My hands were shaking as I turned it off. I went to the front door, and it was unlocked. I know I locked it. I always lock it. I bolted every lock, pushed the couch in front of it, and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I found a sticky note on the mirror. "You forgot this." It was in his handwriting. I checked the apartment. Every window was locked. The chain was still on the door. There were no signs of forced entry, but someone had been inside. Someone who knew exactly how to move without making a sound. Someone who still had a key. I moved out 2 days later, got rid of everything I owned. New city, new job. Didn't tell anyone from my past where I went. I thought I'd finally escaped. But a few weeks ago I got an email, no subject, just an audio clip. It was me, brushing my teeth, humming. You could hear the running water, the hum of the bathroom fan. It had been recorded from the hallway just outside the door. I live in a secure building now. Cameras, doormen, triple locks. I haven't seen him, haven't heard his voice, but I know he's watching. I know because sometimes I wake up and my door is unlocked again, even when I swear I locked it. And every time I try to tell myself it's just stress, I remember what he used to say. I'll always be a part of you, whether you want me to or not.
Have you ever broken up with someone and felt relief? Like your lungs could finally breathe after months of suffocating? That's how I felt after I ended things with my ex, Jason. At first, he was charming, a little intense, but I liked that. He'd text me cute memes, show up with coffee, say he couldn't stop thinking about me. But as the months went on, the constant need for attention turned into obsession. He tracked my location on SnapMap, questioned me when I didn't respond in 5 minutes, and once even showed up outside my work after I said I was too busy to meet. So, I cut it off, blocked his number, deleted him from everything. I thought that would be the end of it. I moved apartments a few weeks later, not because of Jason, but because I had found a cheaper place closer to work. Only a handful of people had the new address. I didn't even post it online. For the first time in months, I felt like I could relax. No more late-night arguments, no passive-aggressive texts. Just quiet. But that quiet shattered the night I found a note under my windshield. It was just 3 words, scrawled in red ink. Nice new place. I froze in the parking lot, heart thudding. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew it was Jason. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else wrote it. Maybe it was a joke. I even laughed nervously to myself as I walked back to my apartment. But when I checked my door, there was another note taped to it. Same handwriting. This time it said, "You can't block real life." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with the lights off and a kitchen knife in my lap, every creak of the building making my nerves twitch. I hadn't spoken to Jason in over a month. He shouldn't have known where I lived. I called the police the next day. They told me, unless he physically harmed me or trespassed, there wasn't much they could do. I started changing my routine, parked in different spots, took different routes home. But the notes didn't stop. Every couple of days, I'd find another one. Sometimes in my mailbox, sometimes slipped under my door. Still waiting. You're so much prettier when you're scared. And once just a single printed photo, me from behind, unlocking my door. That was the moment I knew I was being watched. I bought blackout curtains and set up an old baby monitor app to act as a motion detector on my windows. I even asked my landlord if the building had cameras. It didn't. But the worst part? I had no proof it was Jason. He was still blocked on everything. For all I knew, he was watching every move I made without saying a word. Things escalated about 2 weeks later. I got home one evening and noticed my welcome mat was missing. Odd, but not horrifying. I shrugged it off, but when I stepped inside and turned on the hallway light, I saw a single footprint on the wood floor. Muddy. A man's shoe. Big. My apartment was small and always locked. No sign of forced entry. Nothing was stolen, but someone had been inside. I could feel it. I started hyperventilating and called the police again. This time, they came out and filed a report, but without signs of a break-in. They said it could have been my imagination. They suggested I get a security camera. I ordered one that same night. The camera arrived 2 days later. I set it up in my living room, facing the front door. It had motion detection and a live feed to my phone. That night, I kept it open on my nightstand while I tried to sleep. Around 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. My heart stopped. I opened the app. Nothing, just the dark room, still and quiet. Maybe a glitch. I tried to go back to sleep. But 10 minutes later, another ping. Motion detected. I opened it again, and this time I saw movement. A shadow. Tall. Just outside the window. I couldn't make out the face, but the way it stood there. Just staring. It was him. I knew it. Jason had found a way to watch me through the cracks in the curtain. I screamed and called 911. The police arrived 10 minutes later, but the figure was gone. I showed them the footage, but it was too blurry to identify. They told me again they couldn't do anything unless I caught him on my property. I begged them for advice, and one officer suggested I file for a restraining order, but I needed proof that it was Jason. I didn't even have his current address. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I unblocked him. Within minutes, I got a message. Took you long enough. I missed your face. I didn't respond. I took screenshots and sent them to the police. I started the restraining order process the next day, but Jason must have sensed something changed because his messages turned darker. If I can't have you, no one can. You look good in red. Should I bring paint? I blocked him again. The fear had become paralyzing. I stopped going out. Called in sick to work. Had groceries delivered and barely opened the door. Every knock made me jump. I even heard tapping on my window at 2 a.m. one night, but when I opened the camera feed, nothing was there. Or maybe he had already backed away into the shadows. My life had become a prison, except the bars were fear, and the warden knew my every move. Then came the final night. I had dozed off on the couch with the TV on low. Around 1:00 a.m., I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. The window. I grabbed the knife from under the coffee table and ran into the hallway. He was inside, Jason. Pale, eyes wide, holding something I couldn't see in his left hand. I screamed and lunged, adrenaline taking over. The knife hit his shoulder. He screamed in rage and stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. I ran into my bedroom, locked the door, and called 911, hyperventilating as I pushed my dresser in front of the door. I could hear him banging, screaming, trying to break in. The police arrived just in time. Jason was arrested, blood dripping down his arm. He had broken the window with a crowbar, which they found next to my couch. The notes, the break-in, the photos, it was all him. He had even stolen a set of keys from my old place and guessed I'd moved somewhere nearby. He's in jail now, serving time for breaking and entering, stalking, and attempted assault. But even now, months later, I still sleep with a knife. I still flinch at footsteps in hallways. And I still wonder how many times he was watching, without me even knowing. Have you ever stayed in a house that just felt wrong? I mean the kind where the air feels heavier in certain rooms, and you find yourself locking doors for no reason. That's what happened to me last summer at a beach house rental in Ocean Point, Maine. I still don't have an explanation for everything, and part of me thinks I never will. But if you ever see a house listing with the words, Ocean View Retreat, Rustic Charm, avoid it. That's all I'll say. It was supposed to be a reunion trip. 4 of us from college, me, my girlfriend Sarah, and our friends Daniel and Morgan, decided to split the cost of a remote beach house for a week. We wanted something quiet, with no neighbors, close enough to walk to the shore, and this place fit the bill. A wraparound porch, huge windows, a private path to the beach. But from the moment we pulled into the long dirt driveway and saw the gray peeling paint and dead trees surrounding it, I felt this weird pressure behind my eyes, like a migraine was coming on. Inside, the house had a musty, old book smell. It wasn't dirty, just untouched. The furniture was stiff and antique. There were heavy curtains on all the windows, and none of the clocks worked. The weirdest thing, though, was the door at the end of the upstairs hallway. It was painted black and had an old-fashioned keyhole but no knob. A brass plate was nailed across it with the words, "Do not enter." At first we joked about it. Maybe that's where they hide the bodies, Daniel said, laughing. Sarah didn't laugh. She said it gave her a headache just standing near it. We shrugged it off and chose our rooms. I made a note to ask the host about it, but the cell reception was terrible, and the house didn't have Wi-Fi. Isolation was part of the charm, right? The first night was uneventful, but I kept waking up to what I thought was someone walking down the upstairs hallway. Heavy, slow steps. I assumed it was Daniel getting up to use the bathroom. The next morning, he swore he never left his room. Morgan said the same. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I let it go. But I did notice something strange. There was sand on the hallway floor, just a small trail of it, leading from the direction of the black door. By the third night, things escalated. Sarah woke me up around 2 a.m., whispering that someone was outside our door. We listened, soft breathing. Right on the other side. I got up, flung the door open and found nothing. No one, But the hallway was ice cold, and that trail of sand was there again. Only this time, it looked like bare footprints, as if someone had walked in from the beach. But only halfway. They stopped a few feet from our door, then vanished. I tried the locked door the next morning, tapped on it, pressed my ear to it. Nothing. But I had this overwhelming urge to open it, like it was calling to me. I even looked for a screwdriver in the kitchen to pry it off the hinges. I stopped myself when I caught my reflection in the window, sweaty, pale, eyes wide. I looked sick. That night, all four of us heard it. A loud banging from behind the black door. It sounded like fists slamming against the wood, frantic, panicked. Sarah screamed. We all rushed to the hallway, and as we stood in the dark, frozen, the banging just stopped. Daniel shone his phone flashlight at the floor and gasped. There were wet footprints now. Not sandy wet, as if someone had walked in straight from the ocean. They led from the door, down the stairs, and vanished by the back entrance. The next day, Morgan wanted to leave. She was pale and shaking, and said she saw something through the attic window, a figure standing alone on the shore, just staring at the house. But the house was on a cliff. No path led directly from the beach up that side. It didn't make sense. We tried to call the host again, but still no signal. Even GPS wouldn't load. Daniel tried driving into town, but the road we came in on was blocked by a huge fallen tree. On the fifth night, I woke up to water dripping. The carpet by our bed was soaked. I followed the trail water leading out into the hall again toward the black door, and this time, it was open. Just slightly ajar, enough to see darkness beyond it. I don't know what came over me, but I started walking toward it. I didn't hear Sarah behind me. I didn't hear anything at all. I just kept walking. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into what looked like a cellar. But the smell, it was salt water and rot. I don't remember what I saw at the bottom. My mind won't let me recall it. Just eyes, I think. And something standing in ankle-deep seawater. Something that wasn't human. Daniel found me at the top of the stairs, sitting on the floor, whispering something over and over. Sarah said. I kept repeating, "The tide's not in yet." We left that morning, packed in an hour, and drove the long way around through a service road Daniel found on a paper map. None of us spoke the whole drive home. A week later, I looked up the house online. The listing was gone. But in an archived forum thread, I found someone who'd stayed there in 2014. They mentioned the same locked door and hearing water in the walls at night. The thread ended with their last post. I saw him last night, standing at the top of the stairs. I think the tide's coming in. Whatever's behind that door, it's not finished. And if you hear footsteps in the night while staying in some remote beach rental, don't open the door. Have you ever been somewhere so quiet, so isolated, that you started to hear things you were sure couldn't be real? That's what happened to me last summer at a beach house rental in Maine. I'm not talking about spooky sounds or creaky floors. I mean voices, footsteps, and eventually, something worse. It started when my girlfriend Jenna and I decided to take a week off work to get away from the city. She found this vintage beach house on a secluded stretch of coast, the kind of place with creaky wooden floors, salt-stained windows, and no Wi-Fi. It was beautiful in a rustic way, and just remote enough that we could hear the waves crashing from the bedroom. On the first day, everything was perfect. We swam, we barbecued, we watched the stars. But that night, as we settled into bed, I noticed a door in the hallway that was locked. Not just closed, locked with a thick, rusted padlock. I didn't think much of it. Old houses have locked closets all the time. Maybe it was just storage. But the next morning, I woke up to find that door slightly open. The padlock was hanging from the knob, still shut, but the door was cracked maybe 3 inches. Jenna swore she hadn't touched it. I figured maybe it wasn't shut tight the day before. I closed it, double-checked the lock, and went on with our day. That night is when things got weird. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of movement in the hallway. Not creaking, not wind, actual movement, like someone walking slowly, deliberately. I sat up and listened. The sound stopped, then a whisper. low, breathy, and unintelligible, like someone murmuring through the wall. Jenna stirred beside me and asked if I was okay. I told her it was probably just the house settling, or maybe waves playing tricks on our ears. But I didn't believe it, and when I went to check the hallway again, the locked door was wide open. I grabbed the nearest flashlight and shined it inside. It was a storage room, dusty shelves, stacked boxes, an old mirror leaning against the wall, but on the floor was a pile of clothing, children's clothing, folded, clean, fresh, like someone had been there recently. I slammed the door shut and relocked it, now more shaken than I wanted to admit. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Jenna said she'd heard a child's laugh around 4 a.m., but there were no neighbors for half a mile. No kids for miles, period. We were planning to leave a day early, but that night sealed it. At 3:17 a.m., we both woke up to our bedroom door opening slowly, creaking louder than anything I'd ever heard. I sat up, expecting to see someone, a burglar, maybe, but the hallway was pitch black. Then I saw it. A small shape standing in the darkness, just standing. I turned on the lamp beside the bed. In that split second of light, there was nothing there. But the locked door, again, open. And this time, the clothing on the floor was gone. We packed in a frenzy and left before the sun was up. On our way out, I noticed something carved into the doorframe of that room, something I'd missed before. It said, "Don't let her out." I never told the rental company what happened. I didn't want them thinking I was crazy, but I did look up the house later and found that in 1984, a little girl had vanished from that very property. Her body was never found, just her clothes, folded neatly in the attic. Story 3. The Guest. Have you ever stayed in a house that feels like someone else is still living there? I don't mean roommates or renters, I mean someone who shouldn't be there at all. Someone you never see, but you know they're watching. That's what happened to me when I stayed at my uncle's beach house in Delaware last July. It was supposed to be a relaxing solo getaway. My uncle had just passed, and the house was in probate, so no one had lived in it for over a year. He always kept the place in good shape, and since I was grieving and burned out from work, my aunt said I could use it for a week. I got there around noon, unpacked, and settled in. But the minute I stepped inside, it felt like walking into a room mid-conversation, like someone had just been there. The weirdest part? There was a single wine glass on the counter, still damp, not dusty, not forgotten, like someone had rinsed it, maybe an hour earlier. I brushed it off as my aunt may be coming by and forgetting to mention it, but I still checked every room. All were empty, nothing out of place. That night, I kept hearing light footsteps upstairs. I was sleeping on the first floor, but I swear I could hear soft pacing. At first I assumed it was just the old house settling, but then I remembered. The upstairs hallway is carpeted. You don't hear footsteps on carpet like that. Not distinct ones. On the second night, I found something that made my blood run cold, an open jar of peanut butter on the kitchen table. The spoon was still stuck in it. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even opened the pantry. I called my aunt immediately, thinking maybe she came by with one of her kids and forgot something. She swore she hadn't been there in over a year. I checked the locks, the windows, everything. Nothing was broken or unlocked. Still, I barely slept that night, clutching a fireplace poker in bed. Every creak or shift of the wind felt like a breath on the back of my neck. The next morning, the peanut butter was gone. Not thrown away, not back in the pantry. Gone. Spoon and all. That's when I realized this wasn't a prank. I was sharing this house with someone. Someone who didn't want to be seen. On the fourth night, I set up a camera using my laptop, pointed at the kitchen. I turned off all the lights, left a glass of water on the table, and pretended to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard the faintest clink, glass touching glass. I stayed frozen in bed until morning. When I checked the footage the next day, my stomach dropped. At exactly 2:13 a.m., the water glass slid 2 inches to the left. No footsteps, no figure, just movement. Then, something worse. A dark smudge like a blurry, semi-transparent figure passed in front of the camera for one frame, not even a full second. I paused the video, zoomed in. The smudge looked vaguely like a person, tall, hunched, thin, but where the face should be, it was just blank. Like someone had erased it. I left that day, didn't even pack, just drove 3 hours back to my apartment. The next week, I got a call from my aunt. She sounded shaken. She'd gone to the house with a realtor. They were planning to sell it. But when they walked in, all the food in the pantry was gone. And on the kitchen table was the wine glass and the spoon. The realtor told her something strange too. The neighbors used to complain about my uncle renting the house to a strange man who never spoke and never left the house. But my uncle never rented it, never even put it on Airbnb. And no one could ever prove anyone had been there. They sold the house 3 weeks later. I never went back. But sometimes late at night I swear I hear those soft carpeted footsteps pacing above me. Have you ever walked out onto a beach during low tide and felt like you were trespassing? Like the ocean had pulled back just enough to expose something it didn't want you to see? That's exactly how it felt the day I found the trapdoor under the sand. This happened last summer when my girlfriend and I rented a beachfront cottage in Maine. It was small, quiet, and cheap. Too cheap, really. But the listing said it was a last-minute cancellation, and we were desperate for a break. The place sat right on the edge of the water. When the tide came in, the waves kissed the front steps. When it went out, it revealed a wide, smooth stretch of sand, pockmarked with old rocks and seaweed. On our third night, I went for a solo walk around 2 a.m. The moon was bright, and the beach was empty, no wind, no sound, just the soft crunch of sand under my feet. That's when I noticed a rectangle near the bluff, about 5 feet long and 3 feet wide. It wasn't natural. The outline was too perfect. I brushed away some of the sand and realized it was a wooden door, old and rotting, with a rusted iron handle sunk deep into the grain. No hinges, no sign it had been used in years. But when I pulled on it, it creaked open like it had just been oiled. Inside was a set of stone stairs descending into pitch black. Now, any sane person would have closed the thing and walked away. But I'm not that smart when curiosity takes over. I used my phone's flashlight and started down the steps. Maybe 10 feet down, I found a tunnel damp, carved from rock, and just tall enough to crouch in. It smelled like salt and old wood. At the end of the tunnel was a room, not big, just a circle carved into the rock with wooden beams propping up the ceiling. And in the center was something that made me freeze. A chair. Just a single wooden chair, facing the wall, with rope tied neatly at its legs and arms, and next to it, a bucket full of teeth. I swear I stopped breathing. Human teeth. Dozens of them. Some yellowed, some bloody, some small like they belonged to a child. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, and that's when I noticed something else. Tally marks. Hundreds of them, carved into the rock, circling the entire chamber like someone had been counting days, victims. I bolted out of the tunnel, slammed the door shut, and ran back to the cottage. I didn't sleep, just sat at the kitchen table until the sun rose, heart pounding. I told my girlfriend everything. She didn't believe me until we went back that afternoon during low tide. But the door was gone, covered. Like the ocean had pulled the sand right back over it. I dug for over an hour, nothing. No outline, no handle, just smooth, wet sand. I even came back the next night at the exact same time. Still nothing. It was like the tide had swallowed the whole thing. The rest of our stay was tense. I kept hearing weird sounds at night, like distant humming or dragging. Once, I swear I saw someone standing on the beach at 3 a.m. just watching the house. But when I blinked, they were gone. After we left, I tried researching the area. Turns out, there were rumors, old fisherman tales about smugglers using underground tunnels beneath the shore back in the 1800s. But one story stuck out. A local man in the 1960s who disappeared for weeks, then reappeared mute and shaking. He claimed he was taken at low tide by the man with the bucket of teeth. I don't know if what I found was part of that legend or something worse. All I know is, I'll never walk on a beach at night again, especially not during low tide. Have you ever rented a beach house and felt like someone else was still living there? Like no matter how many windows you opened, the place still held its breath? That's how it felt when my friends and I stayed at this rental near Outer Banks, North Carolina. There were 4 of us, me, Eric, Jenna, and Chris, just out of college and ready for a week of sun, drinks, and dumb beach memories. The house was an old 2-story cottage perched right on a private strip of sand. Perfect views, faded nautical decor, and a weird smell like seaweed and mothballs. But we didn't care. We'd paid for it in full and weren't about to waste a second. On the first day, we noticed something strange. A locked room at the back of the house. Solid oak door, padlocked shut, with a "Do Not Enter Owner's Storage" sign nailed above it. Weird, but we figured it was where the owners kept personal stuff. Still, Chris tried the handle more than once. Just to see, he said. That night, I couldn't sleep. The waves were louder than they should have been with the windows closed. I also kept hearing something creaking. At first, I thought it was just the old house settling, but it was rhythmic like footsteps upstairs. Problem was, we were all on the 2nd floor. And the locked room? It was directly beneath us. The next morning, I brought it up. Eric joked that the owner was probably sleeping in there. Jenna didn't laugh. I had a dream, she said, that someone was whispering under the floor. Chris went downstairs and knocked on the door. No response. So he left a beer can on the floor outside it like a prank. It was gone the next time we checked. On the 3rd night, Jenna woke us up screaming. She swore she saw someone standing in the hallway. A man. Tall, wet-looking, just standing still and breathing. Chris said she probably dreamed it. I wasn't so sure. I'd heard something too, a faint dragging sound across the floor. We decided to leave the house the next morning and hang out in town. When we came back that night, the front door was unlocked. None of us had done it. Inside, nothing was missing, but something was off. Our beach towels were moved. A wet footprint led from the back door into the hallway and stopped in front of the locked unit. We called the rental agency. They brushed it off, saying it was probably the cleaning crew. At 2 a.m., and besides, that footprint wasn't from one of us. It was huge, way bigger than any of ours. I measured it with my hand. The toes were oddly long, deformed. That night, we pushed the living room couch against the locked door. Chris even wedged a chair under the handle. We tried to laugh it off. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sharp bang. The chair had been knocked over. The couch had moved a few inches. And the lock? Still on, but now slightly twisted, like someone had been yanking on it from the other side. Eric had enough. He wanted to leave. But the next morning, our car batteries were dead. All 3 vehicles. We hadn't even parked close to the ocean, so salt spray wasn't the cause. It was like someone had drained them. The final night, we all slept in the same room upstairs with the door locked. Around 4:30 a.m., I heard whispering through the floor. Not voices, just one deep voice, repeating something over and over, like a chant. When I pressed my ear to the wood, it stopped. Then, a knock. From below. We left the next morning. We didn't even pack right, just threw bags in the trunks and took off once someone jumped us with cables. I never went back, but a month later I found a post about that house. A Reddit thread called "Cursed Beach Rentals." Someone posted a photo of the exact same house and said, "If you find a padlocked room at the back, do not stay." My cousin disappeared from there in 1997. Have you ever noticed how empty a Costco can feel in the final 15 minutes before closing? The massive warehouse, usually teeming with shoppers, suddenly becomes unsettlingly quiet. A few years ago, I worked as a night stalker at a Costco in Washington State. I used to think the worst part of the job was dealing with pallets or customers who lingered too long. That changed after the night I saw someone in the freezer aisle that made me question whether I was alone or being watched. It was a rainy Thursday night, and we were down to skeleton staff. I was assigned to restock the refrigerated section, mainly dairy and frozen goods. The store had officially closed at 8:30 p.m., but employees often stayed well past midnight. I always wore earbuds under my hoodie to break the silence while I worked. But that night, something made me pull them out. I had just finished loading tubs of sour cream when I heard footsteps, not heavy like a coworker's boots, but light, almost barefoot. I looked down the length of the freezer aisle, half expecting to see a fellow employee. Instead, there was just empty space, stretching toward the rear loading area. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was the building settling. Costco is cavernous and echoey, especially when you're alone. Still, I decided to check the security camera monitor near the back wall to see if anyone was around. What I saw made me freeze. A tall, thin man wearing a white shirt and jeans, standing in the corner of the freezer aisle, unmoving, just watching. I bolted toward the front of the store, past aisles of bulk cereal and stacked TVs. My heart was pounding. There weren't supposed to be customers in the building. I called my manager, Paul, who was working inventory in the pharmacy section. He hadn't seen anyone. We met near the security office and decided to do a full sweep. Paul radioed the janitor and the other 2 workers on duty. No one had reported seeing a man like the one I described. Together, Paul and I walked the perimeter of the store, checking every aisle. Nothing. We unlocked the employee-only back area and made our way through the stockroom, where rows of shrink-wrapped goods formed eerie, shadow-filled corridors. We finally reached the freezer aisle. It was ice cold. The hum of compressors filled the silence. Nothing was out of place until I noticed a single handprint on the glass door to the frozen meats. Not a smudge, not a grease mark, a clear handprint, as though someone had pressed their palm firmly against it recently. Paul looked concerned but tried to play it cool. Probably a customer who didn't leave when the announcement played, he said. I nodded, pretending to believe him. But we both knew that the store's exit alarm would have triggered if someone left without checking out, and the entrances were locked from the outside once closed. That's when we heard the soft ding of a shopping cart. It was unmistakable, and it was coming from the far end of the building. We rushed over, hearts racing. The sound had come from the automotive section, where seasonal goods were stacked. It was empty, but there, in the middle of the aisle, was a shopping cart. Not just any cart, it was filled with an odd assortment of items: a single gallon of bleach, duct tape, a teddy bear, and a raw pack of ribs. I remember that detail vividly because I asked, "Who the hell shops like that?" Paul didn't answer. He was staring past the cart, toward the dark hallway that led to the employee break room. The door was slightly ajar. We slowly approached, and Paul called out, "Hello? This is store security. If you're in here, you need to leave now." No response. I pulled out my phone to record, just in case. We pushed the door open and stepped inside. The break room was empty. At first. Then we saw movement under the table, like someone had just crawled beneath it. Paul flipped the lights on, and we found nothing. Not a soul. Just a plastic Costco membership card lying on the floor. It didn't have a name, just a black stripe and the word guest in red. That's when the alarm sounded. The security system triggered in the rear receiving bay. Someone had opened the emergency fire door. We sprinted there, passing the now still shopping cart. The back door was wide open, and the freezing night air blasted into the loading dock. We stepped outside and scanned the lot. Nothing. No footsteps, no cars, no sign of anyone. We reviewed the security footage later. The cameras had gone fuzzy at the exact moment the cart appeared in the aisle. The figure, tall, pale, wearing white, could barely be made out standing just beyond the frozen meats, but his face was a blur. Not pixelated. Just wrong. I never saw that man again. A few days later, a regional manager came to the store and quietly upgraded our security systems. They never explained why. A few of us employees whispered about what happened, but nothing was ever made official. Paul eventually transferred to another location. As for me, I quit 2 months later. Every now and then, I still get chills when I pass by a Costco, and I never go near the freezer aisle after dark. I started working at Costco right after college, mostly late shifts. Closing time was my favorite. Once the last customers left, the place went eerily quiet. It's hard to describe the atmosphere of an empty Costco, the towering shelves, the humming lights, the faint echo of footsteps. It was peaceful, but sometimes too quiet. Almost unnatural. One Tuesday night, I stayed late to restock the frozen section. It was just me and 2 other employees finishing up before locking the doors. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard the intercom crackle a faint whisper, like someone trying to talk through static. "Hello?" I called out. My coworkers didn't hear it. They were at the opposite end of the store. I brushed it off. As I was stacking frozen pizzas, I felt something behind me, that prickling feeling like you're being watched. I turned and saw someone standing at the end of the aisle. A man, tall, wearing what looked like a hooded jacket. I called out, "Sir, we're closed." No answer. He didn't move. I blinked and he was gone. I went to check the security feed. The cameras had been glitching all night, but on one screen I caught a glimpse of him. He was walking down aisle 5, but moving strangely, like his steps skipped frames, almost like the footage itself was broken. I grabbed my radio to ask if anyone saw him, but the line was filled with static. Around 11 p.m., one of my coworkers, Jake, said he saw a shadow by the loading dock. We went together to check, but there was nothing, just the sound of the freezer units humming. That's when we realized the main doors weren't locked. We could have sworn we locked them earlier. We decided to sweep the store, aisle by aisle. As we passed aisle 9, we found something that made my blood run cold. A cart, half filled with items, but all of them were wrong. A single children's shoe, a broken clock, a photo frame with a picture of someone's face scratched out. None of these items came from the store. The power flickered, and the lights dimmed for just a second. When they came back on, the cart was gone. Just gone. Jake swore he saw a figure dart into the next aisle, but when we checked, there was nothing. No footsteps, no sound. We decided to check the cameras again, and that's when we saw something that made us freeze. On the screen, the man in the hood was standing right in front of the camera, looking directly at it. Only, we couldn't see his face. It was blurred. Like the camera couldn't process it. Then, the screen went black. That's when the intercom came on again. This time, it wasn't static, it was a voice. Deep, raspy, saying, "You shouldn't be here." The words repeated, over and over. We ran. We didn't even lock up. We just ran. The next morning, management reviewed the footage. Most of it was gone, deleted. The only clip left was a single frame, me and Jake, standing in aisle 9, looking terrified. And in the background, behind us, the man's hooded silhouette. I quit the next day. Jake still works there, but he refuses to talk about that night. I've always loved shopping at Costco. I'd go every other Sunday after church, do my bulk buys, grab a hot dog, then head home. Nothing ever felt unsafe there. Big open aisles, bright lights, friendly staff. Until I saw the man in aisle 17. The first time I noticed him, I didn't think much of it. He was standing perfectly still by the storage bins, facing the shelf. I thought maybe he was reading a label, but when I came back around 5 minutes later, he hadn't moved an inch. Same posture, same direction, just still. I joked about it to my husband when I got home, but he shrugged it off. The next weekend, he came with me. As we pushed our cart through the store, I pointed to aisle 17. There. That's him. But the aisle was empty. I laughed it off. Maybe he was a regular. Maybe I just had an overactive imagination. The third time was different. I went alone again, and there he was. This time, he turned his head slightly when I passed, not fully, just enough for me to see that his eyes were wide open, too wide, and his pupils, they weren't right. They looked cloudy, like the surface of water right before a storm. I told a store associate. She said no one else had mentioned anything. I described him: black hoodie, tall, pale skin, unmoving. She paused, then asked, "Did you say aisle 17? When I nodded, her face changed. She said quietly, We don't use that aisle for stocking anymore. Too many issues. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then said, things fall. Shelves shift. We've had injuries. Cameras go out. That's when I realized the lights in aisle 17 always flickered slightly, just enough to be noticeable. She told me not to worry, but she didn't sound convinced. That night, I dreamt about the man. In my dream, I was back in the store. The lights were off. The shelves were empty. And he was standing at the end of the aisle, just staring. No mouth, no nose, just those clouded eyes. I woke up covered in sweat. The next visit, I avoided aisle 17 entirely. But somehow, as I turned a corner, I ended up there. I didn't even realize it until I saw the same man now in the middle of the aisle, facing me. Closer. This time, he took a step forward. I turned and ran to customer service. But when they followed me back, he was gone. The store associate who'd warned me before looked genuinely shaken. I believe you, she said. You're not the first to see him, but you're the first he's followed. I stopped going to that Costco. But sometimes, I still dream of him. And twice now, I've seen someone who looks just like him, once in the reflection of a window and once across the street from my apartment. I don't know what he is, but I know this. He's not done with me. I work the checkout line at Costco. It's a decent job, good pay, solid hours. The only boring part is scanning thousands of items for hours at a time. But sometimes, weird things happen. And one night last winter, something happened that still messes with my head. It was a Tuesday evening. We were about 30 minutes from closing, so the rush had died down. I was at register 4 when a man walked up without a cart. He held a single item, a plastic container of roasted chicken. That wasn't the weird part. The weird part was his membership card. It was black, completely black, matte, no name, no photo. Just one thing on it, the number 1. I tried to scan it, but the system glitched. Screen went red for a second, then flashed. Do not process. I looked up and said, "Sir, I think your card isn't working." He didn't answer. He just stared. His eyes were a shade too light, his skin almost translucent. I tried scanning again, same error. Then my screen went dark, completely black. I called for a supervisor. When I looked back, the man was gone. Just gone. I checked the cameras with the floor manager. But here's the thing, the footage showed me scanning items, talking to someone. But there was no one in line. I looked like I was talking to thin air. Later that night, I found the card still in my drawer. I know he didn't hand it to me, it was in his hand the whole time. But somehow, there it was. Black, cold, numbered 1. I handed it to security, and they sent it to corporate. The next day, we got a memo from HQ. Do not engage. If card 1 appears again, report immediately. Do not attempt to scan. No explanation. No context. Just that. Everyone was confused. One older cashier went pale and told me quietly, "That card showed up once before, back in 2009. The cashier who saw it quit the next day, claimed she was being followed." I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I dreamt I was back at register 4. Alone. The lights flickered, and the man was standing in front of me, not saying a word. Just watching. The beep of the scanner echoed endlessly. But I wasn't scanning anything. 2 weeks passed, no sightings. I started to think maybe it was just a weird prank. Until I saw a photo in the break room. A group picture of the store's original staff from when it opened in the early 90s, standing at the edge of the group, nearly out of frame, was the man. Same face, same eyes, same blank stare. And in his hand, a card, black, with a faint 1 just visible. I don't work at that Costco anymore, I transferred. But every so often, I check my drawer just to be sure that card isn't waiting for me again. And every time I scan a new membership, I hesitate for half a second, praying I don't see all zeros. It wasn't just me who had strange encounters at that Costco. A few weeks after I transferred, I caught up with Marcus, one of the night stalkers. He told me about something that happened to him in the freezer aisle, something that still gives him chills. That night, Marcus was restocking frozen pizzas, headphones in, zoning out to his playlist. The store was closed, lights dimmed, and the only sounds were the hum of the freezers and the occasional beep from inventory scanners. Then, he noticed it, a sudden drop in temperature, colder than usual, even for the freezer section. He turned around and saw a figure at the far end of the aisle. At first, Marcus thought it was just another employee, until he realized the person wasn't wearing a uniform. Instead, the stranger was dressed in all black, standing completely still, holding what looked like a single rotisserie chicken, just like the one I'd seen before. The man's eyes locked on Marcus. He felt rooted to the spot, breath fogging in the freezing air. The stranger slowly raised his hand, revealing a black card mat with the same one printed on it. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Suddenly, all the freezer doors slammed shut at once, echoing through the empty store. The lights flickered, and when they steadied, the stranger was gone. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there at all. On the shelf where the man had stood, Marcus found a single black feather coated in frost. He reported it to security, but of course, the cameras showed nothing. Just Marcus, standing alone in the aisle, looking terrified. Now, every night Stalker checks the freezer aisle twice before locking up, and every so often, someone finds a black feather frozen and out of place. Maybe the man with the black card is still out there waiting for the next person to see him. Or maybe, he never really leaves. We all know McDonald's a beacon of comfort, open day and night. But after midnight, the familiar glow turns eerie. The laughter fades, replaced by silence and shadows. The golden arches become a lonely outpost, where the rules of the day no longer apply. For the night shift crew, it's a different world, one of isolation, strange noises, and unsettling moments. These employees are the keepers of the empty lobby, attuned to every creak and flicker. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the midnight shift, where comfort food meets creeping dread. Welcome to the stories that haunt the golden arches after dark. The night shift at McDonald's is a world apart, empty, silent, and isolating. The building, built for crowds, becomes a cavernous shell. Every creak and flicker feels amplified, every shadow suspicious. Young employees, unprepared for the psychological toll, find their minds playing tricks on them. The line between reality and imagination blurs in the dead of night. These are real stories from those who face the darkness alone. What happens when you're the only one awake at McDonald's after midnight? I was 18, working the overnight shift at a small McDonald's on the edge of town. Most nights were uneventful until he appeared. At 2:15 a.m., a man in a red windbreaker and baseball cap would silently stand at the drive-through window, staring in. He never spoke, never ordered, just watched, motionless. His presence was unnatural, his stare chilling. After a minute, he'd turn and vanish into the darkness, leaving the lot empty. I tried to rationalize it, but he kept coming back, night after night. My quiet job was about to become a waking nightmare. His visits became a ritual. Every night at 2:14 a.m., he appeared in the same spot. We joked about it, but the dread was real. Our manager Kevin checked the security footage for answers. But every night, during his appearance, the cameras glitched, static frozen frames or distorted blurs. The system showed nothing and the techs found no faults. It felt like we were being watched by something that didn't want to be seen. The fear grew. This was no ordinary late-night visitor. The golden arches had a secret, and it was watching us. Then, the man vanished for a few nights. Relief was short-lived. One night, the drive-through speaker crackled to life. No car, no order, just static and heavy breathing. A whisper, "I see you." Frozen with fear, I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. The lot was empty until I spotted a crouched figure behind the dumpsters. My light caught him, the man in the red windbreaker. He tilted his head in a jerky, unnatural motion, then sprinted into the trees with inhuman speed. I locked every door, heart pounding. The night shift was never the same. Some stories stay with you long after the sun comes up. I was 21 and juggling college classes during the day with night shifts at a McDonald's to make ends meet. It was located in a quiet, sleepy suburb, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. The job was perfect for my schedule. After 10 p.m., I usually worked the drive-thru by myself. The stillness of the late hours didn't bother me. In fact, I welcomed it. It gave me time to study between the occasional late-night customer or just get lost in my music, with one earbud in and the other listening for the telltale ding of a car. That simple, predictable routine was my anchor. It kept me grounded until the night the routine shattered, and I started hearing a familiar voice through my own headset. It happened on a quiet Sunday, creeping close to midnight. I was sweeping the floor near the drive-thru window, the rhythmic scrape of the broom being the only sound in the empty restaurant. Suddenly, my headset crackled to life, a burst of static that made me flinch. A woman's voice, calm and strangely firm, cut through the noise. Number 7. No pickles. I didn't hear a car pull up, which was unusual, so I turned to check the camera monitor mounted above the register. The screen showed nothing, just the empty, dimly lit drive-thru lane. No car. No glowing headlights. No person standing at the speaker. Confused, I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet space. Please pull forward to the first window. But there was no reply. No car came. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I walked over to the glass window and peered out into the darkness, searching for any sign of a customer who might have walked off. The parking lot was a sea of silent, empty asphalt. There was nobody at the speaker box, nobody walking away. I tried to rationalize it, to push the weirdness away. It must have been radio interference, I told myself. Maybe a stray signal from a trucker's CB radio, or another drive-thru nearby. It was a flimsy explanation, but it was all I had. I shook my head, took a deep breath, and forced myself to go back to my cleaning, trying to forget the disembodied voice and its oddly specific order. The very next night, it happened again. Same time, same unsettling calm. The headset crackled, and the same voice echoed in my ear. Number 7. No pickles. The tone was identical, a perfect replay of the night before. This time, I froze completely, the broom handle clutched tightly in my hands. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I hadn't imagined it. My eyes darted to the security camera feed just in time to see the screen flicker. For a split second, there was a strange pulse of light at the speaker, like a camera flash in the dark, and then it was gone. The lane remained empty. My hand trembled as I radioed my manager, telling him the speaker was acting up. He checked the system from his office and said something that made my blood run cold. The order was real. It had been logged in the system, but when I asked where it came from, he just brushed it off as another tech error. I tried to tell my coworker Becca about the voice in the headset. She was my friend, and I thought if anyone would believe me, it would be her. But she just laughed it off, teasing me about being overtired and letting the spooky quiet of the night shift get to me. She didn't take it seriously at all, that is, until the following weekend, when she worked the early morning shift, the one that bridges the gap between the dead of night and the dawn. She was leaving for the day through the back employee entrance around 6 a.m. She pushed the door open, stepped into the cool morning air, and then stumbled back inside moments later, her face pale, looking like she had just seen a ghost. Her own ghost. She told me, her voice shaking, that there had been someone in the drive-thru lane. Not in a car, just standing there, staring directly at the pickup window. The figure had the same build as her. The same color hair pulled back in the same messy ponytail she always wore for work. It was, for all intents and purposes, her exact double, standing silently in the empty lane. Becca said she stared for what felt like a lifetime, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. Then she blinked, just once. A single, reflexive action, and when her eyes opened again, the figure was gone. Vanished without a trace. She didn't laugh at my story anymore after that. A few days later, the experience seeped into my subconscious. I had a dream that was so vivid, so terrifyingly real, that I woke up with my heart pounding against my ribs. In the dream, I was at work, wearing my headset, trapped in an endless night shift. The drive-thru speaker kept clicking on, and a distorted, sorrowful voice repeated the same phrase over and over again. "You forgot me. "You forgot me. You forgot me." In the dream, I tried desperately to pull the headset off, to silence the accusing whisper, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like it had melted into my skin, becoming a part of me. I woke up in a cold sweat, the static from the dream still buzzing in my ears. That night, I came dangerously close to calling out sick. The memory of the dream was too fresh, the feeling of dread too heavy, but I didn't want to seem paranoid or unreliable, so I forced myself to go in. I told myself it was just stress, my mind creating monsters out of exhaustion. I tried to keep myself busy, cleaning and stocking with a frantic energy. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a familiar sense of foreboding settled over me. And then, it came. The crackle in my headset. The same calm, firm voice. 1-7. No pickles. This time, I didn't answer. I didn't look at the camera. I just stood perfectly still, hoping that if I ignored it, it would go away. But then, on the order screen, the words appeared, and the pickup timer began its relentless countdown. Someone, or something, was waiting. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely stand upright. The order was on the screen, a digital ghost demanding to be served. The timer was ticking down, each second a tiny hammer blow against my sanity. It was no longer just a voice in my ear. It was a demand, an expectation. Something was out there, in the dark, and it wanted its food. I felt a strange, horrifying pull, an obligation to complete the transaction. My feet felt like they were made of lead as I walked slowly, deliberately, toward the drive-through window. My heart was a frantic drumbeat in my chest, so loud I was sure it was audible in the silent restaurant. I was terrified of what I might see, but even more terrified of the unknown. I reached the window and hesitated, my hand hovering over the cold metal frame. I took a deep, shaky breath and forced myself to look outside. This time, the lane wasn't empty. There was a car there, a dark, nondescript sedan, its engine humming silently. It hadn't been there a moment ago. My eyes scanned the interior, trying to see the driver, and what I saw made me physically stumble backward, a gasp escaping my lips. It was me. Sitting behind the wheel was a perfect reflection of myself. She was wearing the same faded college hoodie I had on, the same silver hoop earrings. She had my tired eyes, my messy bun. It was an impossible, terrifying mirror image. She, the other me, just stared back at me from the driver's seat. Her expression was completely blank at first, a hollow, empty mask. It was like looking at a doll that had been made to look like me. Then, her lips curled into a smile. It was the most horrifying smile I have ever witnessed. It was cold, empty, and utterly devoid of warmth or humanity. It didn't reach her eyes, which remained like dark, vacant pools. As she held my gaze, her voice came through the speaker again, not in my headset this time, but from the restaurant's external speaker, a low and chilling statement that wasn't in order. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. And then, in the blink of an eye, the car was gone. It didn't drive away. It didn't speed off into the night. It simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a solid, real object in the drive-through lane. And the next, there was nothing but empty pavement under the dim yellow lights. The order vanished from the screen. The timer stopped. It was as if the entire encounter had been wiped from reality. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just stood there, shaking and crying, my mind struggling to comprehend the impossible thing I had just witnessed. I called my manager, my voice a choked whisper, and told him I had to go home. He didn't ask any questions. He just told me to clock out. I never worked another night shift again. Even now, years later, I still hear my own voice in my dreams. 1-7. No pickles. I don't know what version of me was in that car, but a part of me is certain she's still out there, waiting in the dark. When I was 19, I took a job at a McDonald's not too far from the apartment I shared with a couple of roommates. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent, and the hours fit my chaotic schedule. The building itself felt ancient. It was the kind of place where the floor tiles seemed to hold a permanent layer of grime, no matter how many times you mopped them. Most of my shifts were at night, usually with just one other crew member and our shift manager, a weary, middle-aged guy named Derek. On my very first day, Derek walked me through the standard tour, the walk-in freezer, the sizzling grills, the complex security system. But just before we reached the small windowless room where the camera monitors were kept, he stopped me. He turned, his expression suddenly serious, and said something I will never, ever forget. "Listen," he said, his voice low and firm, making direct eye contact. "If you're ever here closing by yourself, I need you to promise me something." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet hallway. "Don't watch the security footage from between 2 and 3 a.m. Just don't." I let out a nervous laugh, assuming it was some kind of rookie hazing, a joke to spook the new guy. But his face remained completely straight, his eyes dead serious. "I mean it," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It's not worth it." My curiosity immediately flared. I asked him why, what was on the tapes, but he just gave a slow shake of his head, turned, and walked off toward the office, leaving the question hanging in the air like a thick fog. Of course, telling a 19-year-old not to do something is the surest way to make them want to do it. The mystery of the forbidden hour began to eat at me. What could possibly be on that footage that was so bad? A botched robbery? An employee stealing from the register? My mind raced with possibilities, each one more dramatic than the last. But I was smart enough to wait. I needed to earn Derek's trust, to become a familiar face on the night shift. I wanted to make sure that when I finally decided to look, I could do it without anyone watching over my shoulder, without having to explain my curiosity. I played the part of the good employee, learning the ropes, and never mentioning his strange warning again. So I waited a few weeks, biding my time, until the perfect opportunity presented itself. It was a Tuesday night, notoriously slow, and my coworker had called in sick. Derek left me to close up the store by myself. The moment the locks clicked into place and the last of the lights were turned off in the dining area, a thrill of nervous energy shot through me. This was it. I made my way to the back office, the silence of the empty building amplifying the sound of my own footsteps. I sat down in the worn-out office chair, the screen of the security monitor glowing in the dark room. My heart pounded in my chest as I used the mouse to scrub back through the night's recorded footage. 1:58, 1:59. Nothing but an empty, silent lobby. Then the clock ticked over. The timestamp on the corner of the screen advanced slowly, 2:09, 2:10. The lobby remained perfectly still, a silent tableau of cheap tables and plastic chairs under the dim security lighting. I started to feel, a bit foolish, honestly, wondering if Derek's warning had been an elaborate prank after all. Then, at exactly 2:11 a.m., it happened. A figure just like walked into the frame from the main entrance. He was a man, dressed in a plain gray hoodie and dark jeans. My first thought was that it was a customer. Maybe the timestamp on the camera was wrong and someone had come in just before I locked up. But then a chilling realization washed over me. I watched the footage again. The front doors never opened. They stayed shut and completely motionless. He had walked right through them. My breath caught in my throat. I was the only person in the building. I knew that for a fact. Yet here was a man on my screen, standing in the middle of my lobby. He didn't move like a normal person. His steps were unnaturally slow, measured, and eerily silent. There was this, gliding quality to his motion, like his feet weren't quite connecting with the floor. He walked to the exact center of the dining area, then stopped and turned to face the front counter, where I would have been standing if a customer had come in. And there he stood, completely motionless, a silent sentinel in the empty restaurant. He wasn't looking around or checking his phone. He was just watching the counter, waiting. I ripped my eyes away from the monitor and, peered through the small window from the office into the lobby itself. It was empty. The tables were bare, the chairs were neatly stacked, exactly as I had left them. There was no man in a gray hoodie. There was nothing but shadows and silence. My heart hammered against my rib cage. I was seeing two different realities at once, the empty room before my eyes and the occupied one on the screen. I forced myself to look back at the monitor, my hand trembling as I used the mouse to scrub the footage forward. He stayed in that same spot, a ghostly statue, for what felt like an eternity. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't move a muscle. The timestamp continued its crawl. 2:30, 2:35, 2:40. At exactly 2:41 a.m. he finally moved. He turned, not toward the door he'd entered through, but directly toward the security camera that was recording him. He took one slow step, then another. His face was obscured by the hood and the poor quality of the video, just a blur of pixelated features. As he took a third step, he simply vanished. He didn't walk out of the frame or duck out of view. In the middle of his stride, he was there one moment and gone the next. The lobby on the screen was empty once again. The recording continued, showing nothing but the silent, still room for the rest of the hour. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone. I had to call Derek. I didn't care what time it was or if I was breaking some unspoken rule. I had to know what I had just seen. I described everything in a frantic, stumbling rush, the man appearing at 2:11, walking through the doors, standing motionless in the lobby, and then vanishing into thin air. When I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't the silence of confusion or disbelief. It was the silence of resignation. Finally, I heard him let out a deep, tired sigh. "I told you not to look, kid," he said, his voice laced with a profound weariness. And that's when he finally told me the truth. He told me that about 10 years ago, long before I started working there, a man had come into the McDonald's late one night. He went into the men's bathroom and never came out. The employee on the overnight shift was alone and swamped with cleaning duties and never noticed. The man's body wasn't discovered until the next morning when the opening manager arrived. He was found slumped over in the third stall, his phone still clutched in his hand, fallen just out of his reach. The screen was still lit up, showing that he had been in the middle of trying to call for help when he died from an overdose. He had died alone, just a few feet away from a potential rescuer who never knew he was there. Ever since that night, strange things had been happening in the restaurant, but only between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. The time of his death, orders for food that no one placed would suddenly appear on the kitchen monitor. Full trash cans would get tipped over inside rooms that were locked from the outside, and on the security camera footage the man would appear. Always at 2:11 a.m., the time he was estimated to have entered the restaurant. He would show up in the lobby, a silent, repeating echo of his last moments. Sometimes he was standing, like I saw. Other times, he was sitting at a table. But he always, without fail, vanished before the hour was up. I asked Derek why nobody had done anything about it, why they kept the place open. He told me they had tried everything. They had the entire camera system ripped out and replaced with a new one. They brought in priests to bless the building. They even shut the entire restaurant down for a week for a deep cleaning, hoping that breaking the routine would make him move on. But nothing ever worked. The moment they reopened, he was back. "He's not an angry spirit," Derek said quietly, his voice full of a strange, sad empathy. "He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's just stuck." That single thought haunted me more than any jump scare or violent ghost story ever could. The idea of being eternally stuck, forever replaying the moments before your lonely death, just watching a place you died in, over and over and over again, forever. What is it about the night shift that seems to invite the supernatural? These stories, born from the humming silence of a late-night McDonald's, tap into a primal fear of isolation. They remind us that familiar places can become alien and menacing when stripped of their daytime context. A restaurant built for noise and crowds becomes an echoing tomb when empty. The cheerful branding, designed to be welcoming, feels like a mocking grin in the dim, sterile light. It is in this profound quiet, this deep loneliness, that the mind becomes a fertile ground for terror. Every unexplained noise, every flicker of a light, every shadow in the corner of your eye is amplified, taking on a sinister weight it wouldn't have in the bright light of day. It is the perfect stage for a haunting. The tales of the man in the red windbreaker, the drive-through doppelganger, and the figure stuck in a time loop all share a common thread. The blurring of reality. Is it a ghost, a glitch in the system, or a mind worn down by exhaustion and solitude? The security cameras that should provide objective truth instead offer corrupted files and impossible images. The headset that connects you to the outside world instead brings you voices from nowhere, or worse, your own. These experiences attack the very senses we rely on to understand our world, leaving the witnesses stranded in a fog of uncertainty. They are left questioning not just what they saw, but their own sanity. Urban legends often serve as cautionary tales, modern folklore that speaks to our collective anxieties. The stories from the graveyard shift at McDonald's are no different. They are about more than just ghosts. They are about the vulnerability we feel when we are alone in the dark. They explore the fear of being watched by unseen eyes, the terror of confronting a version of yourself that is not you, and the profound sadness of a soul who is lost and forgotten. These narratives transform a global symbol of convenience and comfort into a place of profound dread, a liminal space where the ordinary rules no longer apply and anything can happen. Perhaps these events are nothing more than tricks of the light or products of a sleep-deprived imagination. Maybe there is a logical explanation for every glitching camera and disembodied voice. But for the people who lived through these nights, the experience was undeniably real. The terror was real. The cold sweat and the pounding heart were real. The truth behind these urban legends may not be about proving the existence of ghosts, but about acknowledging that some places, at certain hours, hold an energy that defies easy explanation. They hold an echo of something that was, or something that should not be. The golden arches are a beacon, a promise of something familiar and safe, no matter where you are in the world. They represent consistency, a predictable experience you can count on, but these stories suggest something else is lurking just beyond that comforting glow. They tell us that behind the clean counters and standardized menus, there can be a darkness that management can't scrub away, and no amount of corporate training can prepare you for. It's the kind of fear that lingers, that follows you home after you clock out, that changes the way you see a place you thought you knew so well. It's a reminder that even the most mundane locations can have a history, a memory that is anything but ordinary. Why do these stories resonate so deeply with us? It's because they take the mundane and twist it into the monstrous. We have all been to a McDonald's. We have all sat in those booths and stood at that counter. The familiarity is what makes the horror so effective. If a place as common and brightly lit as a fast food restaurant can become a gateway for the inexplicable and the terrifying, then where is truly safe? It suggests that the veil between our world and another is not confined to ancient castles or fog-shrouded graveyards. It can be as thin as the glass of a drive-through window on a lonely Tuesday night. The employees in these stories are left with unresolved terror. The man in the red windbreaker is still missing, his ghostly image perhaps still appearing at 2:14 a.m. for some new unsuspecting employee. The doppelganger in the car is still out there, waiting for her order. The man who never left is still pacing the lobby, stuck in his final moments for eternity. There is no neat resolution, no ghost busted, no mystery solved. There is only the lingering question, the chilling uncertainty that these phenomena are ongoing, a permanent feature of the locations themselves. The horror doesn't end when the story does. It simply waits for the next person to work the night shift. So, the next time you find yourself on a dark highway, the only light for miles coming from those familiar golden arches, you might pause for a moment. You might think about the person on the other side of that speaker, alone in the quiet building. You might wonder what they see when they look out into the darkness, or what they hear when the restaurant is silent. You might ask yourself what truly happens after midnight, when the world is asleep, and the only things awake are the lonely and the lost. Because after hearing these stories, you can never be entirely sure what's real and what's just waiting for you at the window.